Welcome to Broadcast Map, the show that covers the world of broadcasting, the Canadian media landscape, sports media, the show's favorite sports teams, as well as news and politics. Here's your host, Ali Musa.
Good afternoon on Monday, May the 5th, 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am joined by sports media guy and enthusiast. How about we say sports enthusiast, Daniele Franceschi. Daniele, thank you so much for taking the time to join me again today.
No, my pleasure, Ali. Thanks for the invitation. Round two. Happy to be back for a second time. That means the first time went all right. And so it's good to be back, man. I appreciate you having me on, and I hope all is well.
Everything's going well, and I'm excited. I enjoy being on this side of the mic. It's always fun.
100%. Anytime you get to talk sports, it's a good day. It's a good thing to talk about. It's a nice distraction. It's entertainment. It's a lot of fun. So yes, no, I'm happy to jump on with you, and you do a terrific job. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much for the kind words. I want to start by asking you about what were your thoughts, because it kind of broke last week, your thoughts on the dismissal of Mike Sullivan from the Penguins. Is it, and of course, just to kind of put it out there, he did, in case people don't know, he did land recently with the New York Rangers again. And
Yep.
Did you, is this a sign of what Kyle Dubas is trying to do over there in Pittsburgh, or in your mind, or do you feel he felt that it was necessary to make a change?
So this one's interesting because if you go back to when Kyle Dubas first landed this job, when he had he tried to execute a succession-like plan here in Toronto, didn't work out for him, and then, there's a parting of ways between the Maple Leafs and Kyle Dubas. He lands in Pittsburgh, and from day one, there was this understanding that Mike Sullivan is in, never mind the good graces, he is the ultimate sort of untouchable in Pittsburgh. The ownership group loved the guy, right? So much so that you rarely see a complete front office overhaul and the head coach remains untouched, right? Nothing changes. It's almost like he was completely untethered from whatever happened atop the organization. And from that standpoint, I mean specifically the hockey operations front office portion of the franchise. So it was a little bit surprising to me that we saw this news come down the pipeline last week. In saying that, I think there are a couple ways you can sort of view it. Number one is there was a mutual understanding that, you know what? The Pittsburgh Penguins as a franchise are in a much different place compared to where Mike Sullivan, the head coach, wants to be. This team has been toiling in mediocrity, and yeah, they still have Sidney Crosby. They've still got Evgeny Malkin. You still got Chris Letang. Sure, that's all fine and well, but ultimately those guys are at a different stage of their career. They're not in a position where they can be the best players, the leading driving forces on a team that's going to, make the playoffs and win championships. That's just not where they are at this particular point in time. So in a weird way, if this decision hypothetically was made on the accord of Kyle Dubas, and he felt it was paramount to make a coaching change, it probably benefited Mike Sullivan the most, did it not? Look where he ended up.
Yeah.
It gave him the freedom and the flexibility to go out and find an opportunity that was probably more attractive, frankly, than what he was currently in. The New York Rangers are a team that, what are they, 2 years removed from being in the conference final? They still have a core that is in their prime. This is not a core that is totally aged out. They just acquired JT Miller, who's an excellent centerman. They have a lot of really attractive pieces that you can continue to build around. And perhaps with the right infrastructure, this is where the coaching comes in, you are now looking at a team that is going to correct course, and suddenly they missed the playoffs this year, but next year they're right in the mix. And so I think Mike Sullivan is the biggest winner in all of this, actually. If you're Pittsburgh, if you're Kyle Dubas, I think Kyle Dubas has now firmly directed all of the arrows and cannons right in his direction. Because if things continue to go sideways and they don't get this right, or they don't rebuild it, and they continue to kind of toil in this realm of mediocrity, and they're afraid to do anything to try and accelerate this process of getting young players on the roster to then build it back up, well, Kyle Dubas is the one that's going to be next in line to be held accountable. So I think Mike Sullivan comes away kind of looking really good here. He's the one that won in this entire situation. Kyle Dubas looks like, yeah, sure, he has the opportunity to select his coach, and that's great. And I'm sure from day one, he probably wanted to do that. But now, more than ever before, there's a heck of a lot more accountability that lies on his shoulders compared to where he was a week ago before they made this decision to move on from Mike Sullivan.
And I still feel that if Keefe was still available, I think Dubas would have scooped him up.
Yeah. I mean, probably. That's his guy, Ali. That's
yeah.
his guy, right? And this is the first time, just to even add one more point on this subject.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's the first time in Kyle Dubas' career as a GM where he's going to go through a process of sitting down with head coaching candidates, interviewing them, and then trying to decipher who the best candidate is. He hasn't done that. When he was with the Toronto Maple Leafs and he stepped into the GM role, remember, he inherited that job from Lou Lamoriello, and Mike Babcock had already been handed a, whatever it was, 6-year, 8-year contract, the most lucrative deal in the history of the National Hockey League at that time for a head coach. So he inherited it. And then when it came time to move on from Mike Babcock, he knew, and everybody knew, who the successor was. We all knew who was sitting there down with the Toronto Marlies just waiting and biding his time. It was going to be Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah.
They never interviewed anybody else, right? They never looked outside the organization. It was all planned, and clearly the decision was going to be premeditated when the time came. And that's what he did. Sheldon Keefe gets promoted. See you later, Mike Babcock. And who knows? Maybe a couple of years ago, before things went south in that press conference, and then, everything that transpired ultimately resulting in his departure, maybe that was the first time where he was actually going to make a change at the head coaching position for the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's probably a good chance, in fact, that if Kyle Dubas was the general manager last season and not Brad Treliving, that Sheldon Keefe wouldn't have been the head coach last season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But we're living in a different universe. That did not transpire. So this is new. This is new territory for Kyle Dubas in his NHL career as a general manager. He's going to have to go out. He's going to have to assemble a list of candidates and sit down and go through the interview process, figure out what he likes and dislikes and who and what qualities he wants and doesn't want, and make that decision. And that goes back to the main point of, well, ultimately, now all culpability falls on your shoulders. That's where we're at. And this is an interesting sort of phase, this next chapter with Kyle Dubas. It's really fascinating to see how it all comes together, how it unfolds for him in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and we don't even know either if where Brandon Pridham even is. And I think if he's still around somewhere looking for something, I think that could be Dubas' next sort of bet there.
Nah, the thing with Brandon Pridham, I do believe when Kyle Dubas made the transition, he made the move from Toronto to Pittsburgh. And it actually all happened quickly. If you remember that infamous press conference, one of the things that Dubas mentioned when he sat there at that podium and just gave us an all-time Toronto sports press conference.
Yeah.
He alluded to the fact that even if it was not with the Toronto Maple Leafs, you would not see him pop up somewhere just for the sake of popping up somewhere. And
I remember that.
What happened a week later? He was a Pittsburgh Penguin, right?
Yep.
He was gone. So that transpired really quickly. And in the short, immediate aftermath, we saw Jason Spezza make the move. Jason Spezza, who played for the Leafs, who Kyle Dubas took him under his wing immediately after retirement. And Spezza remained loyal and said, I'm going to go and I'm going to join him in the Penguins front office. And for all we know, that could be working out really well for Jason Spezza, and maybe that leads to something bigger for him down the line. Brandon Pridham, I kind of believe, had a similar opportunity there, to where Kyle Dubas clearly envied that man and had held him in such high regard because, as we all know, he's a huge asset when it comes to salary cap management. The guy literally wrote the cap. Like, he created part of that aspect of the CBA, defining the parameters for cap management. He created that. And I do believe that when the opportunity presented itself, Cal Dubas was initially introduced and hired as the president of hockey operations in Pittsburgh, not the general manager. And I tend to believe that there were probably some discussions and conversations that were likely had, to where among the many people that he was able to lure to Pittsburgh, Brandon Pridham was probably going to be among that group that was in consideration, and perhaps even in consideration for the general manager job. Therefore, it would have allowed him to leave Toronto, where he's the assistant general manager. You get a promotion, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But here we are. We're still here. And Kyle Dubas, among the many things that he has sort of changed and tailored as he's gone through this process in terms of the messaging, he said he wouldn't be the GM. He was going to stick to that president of hockey ops role. Sure enough, he's the general manager. He's not just the president of hockey ops, he's the GM. So he's Mr. Everything. Yep. And Brandon Pridham, thankfully for the Leafs, still a part of their front office, and is obviously holds a very, very important role alongside Brad Treliving when it comes to figuring out all the cap machinations, how to make sure you're cap compliant, where the numbers fit in, and heck, you're going to need them this summer when you have, Marner free agent, Tavares free agent, and Matthew Nyes, who's in for a massive raise as an RFA.
Yeah,
all of those situations are going to be part and parcel, obviously, among many decision makers, the Brad Treliving, Brendan Shanahan's of the world. They're going to be front and center and all that, but Brandon Pridham is going to be right there in the background, assisting and playing a big role in that process as well.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the Leafs, what did you think of what did you think of when they battled with the Senators there? What did you think of Oliver Ekman-Larsson this year?
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned OEL. He's one of those guys, Ali. He doesn't get enough credit. He's really underrated, and I don't know if you recall, but I find his career arc so fascinating, because when he first broke into the NHL with Phoenix, previously Arizona, right? No longer, now defunct. But when he first broke into the NHL, he was a guy that was regarded as a sort of an offensive threat, a puck moving, point producing defenseman, and he was awesome in that capacity for the first 10 years of his career. Like, we're talking about a decade's worth of production nearly, where he was an elite offensive defenseman, scored 20 goals in this league, right? A guy that had some serious offensive ability. And as his career has progressed, and now we're in really the latter stages of it, you've seen his game evolve. For a guy that is age, he's no longer as quick, as a skater. But guess what? Boy, can he still move that puck. Boy, can he still outlet the puck and make plays on with his skating and his IQ. And his defensive acumen, I feel, is really underrated, because that reputation of him being an offensive threat, that's always been front and center. And he goes to Florida, right? Florida, where I think that was, I don't want to even call it a rejuvenation, but almost a period of time where last year throughout the playoffs and winning a Stanley Cup, people finally grew to appreciate everything he does, right? To put him in the spotlight on that sort of stage, to say, oh my goodness, like we've always known this guy is a good defenseman, but to see him at this stage of his career doing the things that he does, particularly on the defensive end of the ice, that's what makes him so invaluable. And the leadership element, the experience that he brings to the Leafs blue line, they are so fortunate to have him as a third pairing guy that can play up in almost in any situation that you need him. And don't you feel really good about having a 5'6" on your blue line that is OEL?
Oh, absolutely.
Simone Benoit. Like it's unbelievable. And that is one of the reasons why, if you're a Leaf fan today and they're getting ready to face Florida in round 2, you feel a little bit more confident. Your belief is greater than it was 2 years ago when these two teams played, because the blue line is littered with experience, with talent, with guys that can play in a variety of situations, guys that have playoff pedigree. They haven't had a blue line like this in the core four era. And OEL is a huge, huge component of all that. You saw him contribute some of that offense in round one, which is an area where this blue line as a whole has struggled historically, not just this season, but, specifically this year under Berube, where they've played a more, I guess, a more conservative style. They're not jumping up into the play as much, right? Not joining the rush. They're trying to make sure they stay home and protect their end of the ice as defensemen. To get some offense from your blue line in round one against Ottawa was huge. And if you can get anything from those guys in round two, you got to feel good. You got to feel good about the Leafs' chances. And I think this blue line is really well equipped to play against this Florida team. They have the right combination of size, intelligence, and experience to make Florida uncomfortable in this type of series.
No, I agree, because see, I mean, overall, even this season, and you factor in and you counter also what they've done in the playoffs. Under Berube, they've looked like a much different team than they did under Keefe.
For sure. No, for sure. I mean, stylistically, it's so much different. That's, it's funny. That's actually one of the things I'm really fascinated about and curious to see within the context of this series. The Craig Berube system, in a sense, is very similar to Paul Maurice hockey.
Yeah.
Right? It's very much dump it in, dump and chase, play physical, block shots, be defensively sound and responsible. Okay, that's great. So the problem there might be, and this is where, if you're a Leaf fan, there are concerns. Well, Florida just executes it better. They really do.
Yeah.
They're more accomplished, and their personnel is better equipped to execute that system more consistently. It worked for the Leafs in the regular season. It's worked for the Leafs in round one, right? It helps keep in terms of maintaining a structure and keeping you as a team composed. That's great. But what happens when you run into a team that plays a similar style? Like, there's no team in hockey since Paul Maurice has taken over the Florida Panthers. That was after the 22 season, I believe. No team in hockey that dumps it in more, that plays more physical than the Florida Panthers. There's no team in the NHL that wins more puck battles, nearly 56% in the NHL, than the Florida Panthers. And the Leafs are trying very much to emulate that type of style. The problem becomes if you run into a team that does it better, naturally, you're probably not going to come out on the right end of things here. What I think Toronto needs to do to an extent here is, I think it goes without saying, the biggest X factor, if you will, for the Toronto Maple Leafs is, can you score goals? Can your offense be the juggernaut-like offense that we've seen at times because your talent, your top-end talent, is so overwhelmingly good? And that puts a lot of pressure on your core guys, your Matthews, your Marner, your Nylander, your Tavares, Matthew Nyes. It puts a lot of pressure on them. But if those guys have a good series, if those guys can put the puck in the net, you're going to feel a heck of a lot better about your chances playing against a Florida team that is going to try and wear you down physically, and they're going to play a very simple meat and potatoes game. Craig Berube talks about north-south game all the time. No team does it better than the Florida Panthers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's just it. I think they've got a really good sort of thing going there with the Panthers. But I think the Leafs are built. I think the Leafs are ready to face them. I think they are.
That's the hope. That's the hope. I would say,
yes.
The only thing. So, regular season is obviously a different animal.
Yes.
But every time these two teams played in the regular season this year, 4 meetings, the Leafs won 1, and the lone victory came in their, I think it was their penultimate meeting or their last meeting. It was right towards the end of the regular season, within the last month of the regular season. There was no Matthew Tkachuk in that game. Brad Marchand was still trying to get acclimated to his role with the Florida Panthers coming over from Boston. So there were a lot of moving parts for the Panthers. No Aaron Ekblad, who's not playing tonight, but again, he was suspended 20 games for PED at the time. So there were just a lot of moving parts. In saying all that, every matchup, including that game, we saw the Leafs struggle against the Panthers team that was able to lean on them physically and limit their time and space. This series, fundamentally, is about time and space. If you can carve out more space in the greasy areas, there's a good chance you're going to generate more offense. And that's where the Leafs, historically, whenever they play a team that tries to lean on them, they've struggled. Even this year against Florida, those games, unlike any other matchup, like they played Tampa, they always seem to fare much better against the Lightning, more comfortable in that environment. No matter who the opponent was, the one team that always felt like it was a major buzzsaw, it was the Florida Panthers. The one team when you watch them play where you thought, this looks more like playoff hockey than regular season hockey, it was the Florida Panthers. And so that's why I put a little bit more stock in the regular season sample size for this particular matchup than any other matchup the Leafs could have potentially drawn. It's because we've seen the Panthers do it successfully like they intend to do it in the playoffs. And that's where time and space, if there's anything, Ali, time and space is what I think will dictate the terms of engagement and what we see in this series.
There you go. Yes. And, I mean, Dallas has looked good. I mean, I was surprised to see they beat the Avalanche there on Saturday there.
I think Dallas is peaking, man. Dallas is starting to fire on all cylinders and hit their stride at the right time. Look, I mean, we all know Saturday is going to go down in Stanley Cup playoff lore as the Mikko Rantanen game. You know, hat trick against his old team in the third period. Unbelievable stuff, right? Like, storybook. But now factor in Dallas is going to get even healthier. They just beat a Colorado team that loaded up at the trade deadline. Nathan McKinnon was so defeated post-game, not just because they lost, right? But he said it. We lost, and they didn't even have their best defenseman and arguably their best forward. No Miro Heiskanen and no Jason Robertson. And still, the Avs couldn't get the job done against the Dallas Stars. And now, what we get in round two is this ultra fascinating, interesting, compelling matchup, whatever adjective you want to use, between Winnipeg and Dallas. And two goalies in Ottinger and Hellebuck that both have their own respective playoff demons. Hellebuck is probably deeper and much worse. Ottinger seems like he falls asleep for the first 4 games of a series before he wakes up. But you've got so many layers to this entire series coming up between those two teams. And I've noticed, I was looking at this today because I was interested in it.
Yes.
Do you know, Ali, who the current favorite is to win the Stanley Cup? According to Vegas, what the betting odds are saying.
You know what? I'm going to take a wild guess at this.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, I'm going to give you two. It's either the Stars or the Golden Knights.
It is Dallas. It's actually, interestingly enough, Vegas is further down than I thought they would be. I think they're like 5th or 6th on the list. It's pretty fascinating. But Dallas is number one. I think they either have just a slight edge over Florida or Florida's right there matched at the same. It was plus 400 for Dallas. I remember that. So the Stars now, according to Vegas, after beating Colorado and with some reinforcements potentially on the way, now the favorite to win the Stanley Cup. And we should remember, they're playing the President's Trophy winners, right? They're going to face the President's Trophy winning Winnipeg Jets in round 2. And yet they're favored. Another one that threw me off too, Washington. Washington won the East. First place in the East, right? Best record in the Eastern Conference, win their division. And they took care of Montreal in 5 games. Montreal, a team that looked really feisty, played great hockey. They were inspired hockey. They beat them in 5 games. The Washington Capitals are underdogs against the Carolina Hurricanes. How does that make sense? The Washington Capitals have the second worst odds to win the Stanley Cup. How does that make sense? It's interesting how Vegas interprets these things and how they look at it. But no, like I think Dallas is legitimate, no question. They're legitimate. You watch that team, they're great, and I think they showed a ton of character and fight. They legitimately faced adversity, right? Like they lost 7 straight coming into the playoffs. They started the postseason looking like they were going to bow out very quickly and they didn't stand a chance. And then they managed to find a way to battle back, show tons of heart. Their best players stepped up in the key moments, and they are dangerous. They are starting to find their rhythm, hit their stride when it really matters most. When the chips are down, they're going to be a tough out, no question about it. Selfishly, I'd love to see Winnipeg, make it through because, I feel like there's just a lot of negativity, pessimism surrounding the Jets all the time. So I would like to see the Jets make their run, right? Make it count that they won the President's Trophy and were the best team in hockey all season long. Selfishly, I'd like to see that happen. But Dallas, very, very good team. And Pete DeBoer.
I was just going to mention him, yeah.
Ali, what do you got to do? 9-0 in Game 7s. How is that even possible?
Wow.
How is that possible?
That's nuts.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I think we've got some interesting matches. I think it's Washington and Carolina, I believe.
Correct. Washington, Carolina, and obviously the Leafs and Panthers.
Leafs, Panthers. And then you've got the Stars and the Jets, as well as you've got the Oilers facing
Vegas.
The Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah.
There you go. These are like go ahead.
No, that series there, because we've touched on a lot of the other teams. That one there with Vegas and Edmonton.
Oh, yeah.
It could really, like that. You talk about a series that to me feels like a bit of a coin flip. That one might be it. Because if Edmonton, despite what they did in round one and how they came back, don't they still feel like a team that has so many holes and flaws?
They do, yeah.
Right? Like the goaltending, Calvin Pickard, great story. He comes in after Stuart Skinner loses the first 2 games. You win 4 straight. Awesome. Okay, still a question mark, right? He still let in a lot of goals and some bad ones at that. Question mark. The blue line, Evan Bouchard, thank you for coming out to the party. You scored some goals. That's awesome. That's awesome. But, man, at times did he look suspect on the defensive end of the ice. The only thing that really, really makes Edmonton feel good as a team that you're going to throw your support behind, it's the fact that they got 97 and 29. Like, anytime you got McDavid and Draisaitl, hey, we're talking about the elite of the elite, and it makes you feel a lot better about their chances no matter who they're playing against. And then Vegas on the flip side, it was a very difficult, challenging series for them against Minnesota. Minnesota's top guys really performed at a high level, and Vegas, frankly, their best guys didn't really show up until the end, right? Like Jack Eichel finally breaks through and scores a goal. It was in the clinching game. That's awesome. They needed it, but their blue line looked a little bit old and slow. Aiden Hill got better as the series went along, but you still got questions about that. I feel like that one is a bit of a toss-up in terms of trying to handicap how that might unfold, who has the edge in certain areas. It really depends to me on what version of Vegas shows up. If you get the really good Vegas, it's going to be a heck of a tough series for the Edmonton Oilers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, all of these series, I'm really looking forward to them because it's going to be, you know what? As an NHL fan, I think this is going to be really, it's going to be like really exciting.
Don't you think that for even Commissioner Gary Bettman, Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley,
yeah,
the way that round one ended, is that not the most ideal sort of way to end things? And proceed to round 2.
It is. It really is.
It's just great for visibility of the sport, the exposure, the popularity of the sport. I know everybody, year after year talks about how the 2 weeks during round 1 of the playoffs are by far the best thing in sports. And, I mean, man, how can you dispute it, right? How can you dispute that? We just watched the NBA and the Stanley Cup playoffs run concurrently. In the NBA, yeah, sure, we had a Game 7 last night, between Houston and Golden State. That's fine and all, but did we see any level of drama remotely close to what you saw in almost every single series in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Not at all.
You can't compare. You cannot compare. Right, never mind a double overtime, Game 7. Winnipeg comes back from 3-1. They score with 2 seconds left. Never mind that. Look at what you had on Saturday with Mikko Rantanen. That in and of itself was crazy. You had even Washington beating Montreal in 5 games. All the games were entertaining.
Yeah.
The atmosphere at Bell Center, unbelievable. So there's just it really is special, and I think this time of year, and specifically the 2 weeks that we just lived through and experienced, that does wonders to sell the game, and it's always a very very positive endorsement for the NHL in general.
Yeah, and
That is,
I loved the Four Nations this year.
the Four Nations was, I mean that might go down as, when we look back, it might go down as one of the more influential events that we've seen that the NHL has ever staged.
Yeah, I want to see them replace the All Star game with the Four Nations. I think that'd be
Well,
much. I think that would be really good if they did that.
I'm totally with you on that. I wonder what the plan and the intention is. I think it was, they're gonna, what is it? Every couple of years we're gonna have a World Cup of hockey. I think they're still working through the kinks of the scheduling and where it's gonna fit and slot in. And obviously, then every biannually we'll also have the Olympics involved, and that's fantastic. That's all big for it. But because we waited so long in between best on best competition, the Four Nations is always going to be a really special event that we're going to look back on and hold on to. Because I don't think we're going to see another tournament that's branded just as like the Four Nations face off. It's going to be World Cup of Hockey,
Yeah.
and that's great. But the Four Nations face off, even if it's just that one time they handed out the trophy and the medals, it doesn't matter, because that tournament happened at such a crucial time for not just the sport, but at such a crucial time for people in our country, for Canadians, for Americans, for people that observe the political climate, understanding what was
Yes.
going on at that time. It added to that aspect of competition. And that's going to be difficult to replicate at any point in the future. Next year, the Olympics are going to happen. The Olympics will be, again, barring something unforeseen, it'll be more about the hockey. It's going to be more about, this is the first time all these countries are competing for Olympic gold again, and that is awesome. And it's about Sidney Crosby playing in his last Olympics. It's about, the Americans with their young up and coming core, that they're finally on the Olympic stage. Great stories all around, but it's not going to have that sort of added element of personal satisfaction, in the sense of it attracted a broader community. That the Four Nations did that, and that'll never be replicated again. It just won't. And that tournament worked wonders for the NHL from an exposure standpoint, drawing more eyeballs. What we saw in that first Canada-US game, where the guys all dropped the gloves and we had 3 fights in the first 9 seconds, like, it just became a spectacle, unlike anything we've seen in a long time for the sport of hockey.
There we go. Yes, this is all going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I should also ask you, I want to also touch on the Jays. I haven't been following too much of the Jays right now with the NHL playoffs, but but the big thing is the extension of Guerrero. What were your, did you feel that the front office had to do that?
In a sense, yes. So let's think about it even this way.
Okay.
So the Blue Jays right now, wearing my Blue Jays hat, but Blue Jays right now, today's an off day. Back in action, starting a 3-game series against the Angels out west, and then they have Seattle. They're 16-18 through 34 games.
Okay? Yikes.
Think about what the conversation and the narrative would have been today, let's say, after they lost 2 of 3 to Cleveland at home, where they blew the game on Saturday, were up 3-1 with 2 outs in the 9th inning. Bullpen lets it go again yesterday as well. What would the conversation be like surrounding Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on May the 5th if the Jays were, with the Jays being 16-18, and he hadn't signed his contract? It would be pretty dark.
Yes.
It would be pretty grim, and there would be a lot of noise. You'd have people talking about trade packages. You'd have people talking about, never mind just him, you'd have people talking about the other veterans on the team, talking about Bo Bichette's future. and it would be a running conversation. So the fact that he signed an extension and he put pen to paper, at the very least, it puts to bed this conversation about what do you do? Trade him, lock him to free agency. That gets tiring. We already did that exercise for a whole season essentially last year, and of course leading up to this one. And there were, depending on the day of the week, sometimes there's optimism, sometimes there's pessimism surrounding it. Well, it's done. And that's what's most important. And for the fan base, at least now optically, the front office can present an image and a message that makes it seem like, hey, we are really committed to wanting to build a winner. That is our goal. We're trying to build a winner. And Vladdy is a huge part of that. They don't have another young star in the making. They don't have another young star in their pipeline. They just don't. And it was almost like, even from Vlad's perspective, there was a perfect confluence of circumstances that enabled him to get paid a very lucrative amount of money, but to get paid because the Jays were also desperate. As much as Vladdy wanted his money and he wanted to go to the highest bidder and make his money, well, the Jays were also sitting there and they're desperate because they need a face. They need somebody to represent what the franchise is, to be a fixture. And at the very least, they can now at least point to Vladdy and say, well, he's it. And he's here for the long haul, and we're going to continue to build around him, and we have time to get it done correctly. So that's why it was important, both in the interim and the long term.
But I think the bigger question will be, is Shapiro and Atkins' future? I actually feel in a lot of, and I've said this before here on air, that the two of them will always be together. If one goes, the other is going.
I think I tend to agree with you. I think there is a world, though, where it depends on the motives of Mark Shapiro. What is Mark Shapiro's end game? What does he want? Right? Does he want to be in this job for the next 5, 6, 7 years, whatever? Is that what he envisions for himself? Or does he envision something bigger? Right? There were rumors and speculation that before MLSE landed on Keith Pelley as their president, their CEO, they potentially looked at Mark Shapiro, and that Mark Shapiro was very much, certainly interested in potentially that opportunity. Something that would represent the next chapter, the next phase in his career as a pro sports executive. So does he want to be in this spot? What else is there left for him to accomplish apart from fielding a winning baseball team? That would be the sole motivation that's left for Mark Shapiro. I want to be a part of the solution. Oh, not just building the stadium up and adding all these luxury suites and different amenities. That's great, right? The stadium's beautiful. It's awesome. He did a great job with that, and he deserves credit for it. Now, the one thing that would be left to motivate him is, I'm tired of us being mediocre. I'm tired of the fact that I have to hear people talk about us not winning a playoff game. Can we go out and deliver success in the playoffs? Success in the playoffs, meaning we win games, we win series, and heck, goodness forbid, maybe one day you win a World Series. But that is what I think I'd be most interested in getting an answer on. What motivates him? For me, that is the only scenario where I could see a departure of some kind between those two individuals. It's if Mark Shapiro makes the decision that he wants to win, and that is something that is now driving him. I've done everything else. I really want to have a baseball team that is great. We want to field a competitive team that is winning and competing and challenging for championships. Well, that might entail one of two things. Either you move on from Ross Atkins, or you keep Ross Atkins And the other flip side is, hey, there's something bigger and better out there that then will incentivize me to leave the president's role with the Toronto Blue Jays. That's where I come back to with all of this. But if you ask me even today, last year it felt like things were tenuous, clearly, with how the season unfolded, with where the contract situations were. But this front office went out and their offseason was pretty decent. They are struggling right now from a lack of depth within. That is evident, and that falls on their shoulders. But look at the moves they made. Pretty decent. And they signed Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I feel like maybe, just maybe, there's an element of security with those guys that even to us as fans, we sit here and we don't understand, we can't comprehend it, but it does feel like they're in a pretty decent spot right now.
Yeah.
Does it not?
Yes, very much. Yeah, but I think though, but see, but if Mark leaves, right, and let's see, like, and there were also rumors, I think, that he was gonna be, that he wanted, that he was next up for the commissioner's job too of MLB.
You know what? That I mean, I wouldn't be stunned at that either. 100%. Talk about a life like that. That's a baseball lifer right there, and a guy that is known for being really, really intelligent and very forward thinking. Loves the big challenge of trying to take a big project, and then actually execute it on a micro level. That I don't know, that does seem really interesting. I hadn't fully honestly heard a lot about that.
I thought that was around like last year or something. I hadn't heard anything recently about it, but
that's a rule though that it wouldn't shock me one bit. It wouldn't shock me one bit. That's a role I could 100% see a guy like him potentially trying to step into. That type of role, that opportunity, would he find it appealing? I don't know, but it does strike me as something that might be interesting for him, and one that would stand out as something he would be open to, possibly.
And that might even, like, do you feel though, and we'll sort of kind of, like, do you feel that it has to do, do you feel that Atkins is Shapiro's sort of security kind of guy, in the sense that Shapiro's kind of keeping him around as the GM just so that if he goes, he can take him, when he goes, he can take him with him, and hey, whatever role he ends up in, that bigger role, he can say, look, here you are, this is where I'm going, and you're going to be in this role. You're going to be my right-hand man kind of thing.
I think he likes, I think they both enjoy the element of continuity. I really think Mark values that a lot with how he builds things. It's, especially with his background in Cleveland, as much as they're spending money here, in Toronto, he's got far more resources than he ever had in Cleveland, right? Think about, never mind just the baseball side of things where they're spending money on the roster, but look at all the projects that he's executed in the stadium. That costs a heck of a lot of money, right? You have to talk people into that. You have to sell it. You have to pitch it and sell it. And he's done that effectively. I think he's one of those guys that really does value assembling a small circle of people that he feels he can really trust. And clearly Ross is one of those guys. So he almost, in a way, and in how this group operates, it's a lot of small ball mentality in a big market environment, right? Coming from Cleveland, where you have to try and find every efficiency and every small advantage that you can, they've taken that mentality and they've now transitioned and brought it over to what you see in Toronto and how they go about their business. Nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing wrong with that. But I definitely get a sense that the familiarity aspect of it is comforting for a lot of these guys, right? So I feel like it's not impossible. I will say this. I would never suggest it's impossible for Mark to retain and stay in this role while moving on from Ross. Would never say that, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business, and if Mark, excuse me, really wanted to see this thing through, but it entailed him being asked to move on from Ross. If push came to shove, do I believe it would happen? Probably, right? Probably. I could definitely envision that. Now, in saying that, unless he's fully pushed or all of the options have been exhausted, is there something comforting about him partnering with Ross Atkins on this side of things? Absolutely. I do feel like that is the case, right? I think they see the game similarly. They share similar views, and their vision tends to be aligned. If their vision wasn't aligned, well, quick answer. I mean, Ross Atkins probably isn't in charge at this particular point in time. John Schneider might not be their manager at this particular point in time. But because there's a shared vision in place and there's a subscription to the philosophy, that's where I think those two are sort of attached and joint at the hip.
Oh, there you go. You know what? It will be a lot of fun. And Daniela, you know what? You and I, you know what? Let's talk sports again real soon. I hope we can do this again. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, my pleasure, man. No, absolutely. Anytime, happy to jump on. Thank you again for the invitation. It was a heck of a conversation. Really enjoyed it. Very enjoyable. Yeah,
me too. Let's do it again. You know, maybe closer to the trade deadline or something. We can the MLB trade deadline. Then maybe we can look at something.
You got me, man. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Sign me up.
Thank you so much for listening and or watching Broadcast Map. To learn more about the show, please visit broadcastmap.ca. While you're there, subscribe to the newsletter so you never miss an update. Besides, it's free. Enter your email address and hit subscribe right on the homepage and at the bottom of all Broadcast Map posts.